Okay, so we'll now start the 6th chapter, which is called as Dhyana Yoga. Okay. In the 5th chapter, as a matter of fact, till the 5th chapter that we have been reading, Krishna has been explaining about different forms of yoga. In the 3rd chapter, we talked about, second chapter, 3rd chapter, Jnana, Karma Yoga. There was in 2nd chapter, there was also knowledge. Krishna was explaining that you're not a body, you're a soul. Then in 3rd chapter, he talked about sacrifices. Right? And when was that? Yagyashishthasina santo muchyate sarva kilvisha. Bhunjate te abham papam ye pachanti atma karana. That whenever you eat, you offer it to Krishna, otherwise you're eating sin. And 4th, we read more other different types of yagyas. Krishna talked about many other forms of yagyas. Agni, a lot of different types of yagyas. So he was saying that yagya is not just a fire sacrifice, yagya is of other forms too. Then 5th, we understood karma in Krishna consciousness. We understood what's the perfection of karma, yoga. There are many verses that demonstrated what are the qualities of a perfected being. And there were many words used for that purpose across the 5th chapter. In the 18th chapter, Krishna says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Jalpasupakicha Pandita Samadarshana. So Pandita was the word used. The quality that was being told was Samadarshina, that he has an equal vision. That's also something we discussed in the 5th chapter. Right? Then the other quality that was discussed in the 5th chapter was equanimity. That person is not disturbed by anything. Na praharshet priyam prape, na cha priyapiram, sthira buddhi rasamudo, brahmavid brahmani sthita. So that sthira buddhi was that another word. So he's sthira. He's not at all affected by the ups and downs, the change of weather, all that changes that are happening. Then he's happy. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukha yo naevati. Adi antavanta konte na teshu ramate buddha. So he knows that this material world is affected in some parshaja. By touching the material world, it's dukha yoneya. It brings us dukha. Right? So he doesn't do that. He's self-satisfied. He's able to control his vegas. Saknoti heva yashodham prak sharira vimokshanat kama krodod bhavam vegam ya uktasa sukhi nara. Sukhi nara was another thing. So like this, Krishna had talked about different qualities of a person who is a self-realized soul. So there are various qualities, right? That blissfulness, there is not being affected by duality. He's full of knowledge. He sees everybody equally, and all those. So, and he's situated in self-realization. Is Brahma Nirvanam, and then there was Brahma Bhuta. So there are many different words, but the concept is still the same broadly. If you understand that, the person who's realized that he is a soul and not a body, and he or she starts to demonstrate those qualities of a soul: equality, self-satisfied, happiness, blissfulness, all that. So these stages can be attained by karma yoga, it can be attained by jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. So in previous chapters, we studied how to attain this Brahma Bhuta stage, the stages Brahma Bhuta, Sthira Buddhi, so on and so forth, all these stages, by karma and jnana. Now we will hear from Krishna how that stage can be attained through Ashtanga yoga. Let me go to my slides. Okay, so before that, let's look at this. This is the summary of the chapter 5. The acronym was dates. Then we have first one was doubts clarified. Arjun was asking that renounce work or work in devotion. And Krishna says working with detachment is easier. Don't try to renounce work. It's not possible in today's world. Then he teaches acting in karma yoga. There were qualities, right? Mind and senses control, no attachment, and understanding that everything I'm doing is for my purification. Then the concept of three doers come in: Ishvara, Jiva, and Prakriti. And then we discuss the whole flow of the process, right? That the sense objects come in contact with the senses, then the senses go back all the way to the mind, sorry, not the mind, the soul, and says that this is what we want. And the soul, under illusion, believes that that is what I want. So the soul asks the super soul. The super soul then, it directs the material nature to execute the order or request of the soul, and then the material nature executes it. And then I either get happiness or distress because of it. There are three doers. Then equal vision. We talked about Paramarthika and Vyavaharika. There are two paths. So Vyavaharika means how do you behave in this world, even though you understand what your true nature is. So we see everybody equally, but we don't necessarily treat them as equally. What does that mean? That we talked about the example of a tiger. A tiger, even though we know he's a living entity and there is Krishna sitting in his heart also, we don't go and hug him. So that was the equal vision part, and then last was the Ashtanga Yoga part. We discussed about the 8 steps of Ashtanga Yoga. So now coming to the summary of chapter 6. Chapter 6 is divided into 4 categories. The first one is enemy or friend. So mind can be your enemy. Atmeva hi atmano bandhu, atmeva ripuratmana. This is the fifth verse of this chapter, where it says that your mind could be your enemy and our mind could be our best friend. So that's something that's, we have to take onus of it. We have to take some responsibility that I have to make my mind. And then Krishna will talk for 20 or so verses. He'll talk about Ashtanga Yoga. You know, how does a Ashtanga Yogi sit and how does he close his eyes and so on and so forth. How he eats, he sleeps, all that. Krishna will give details of Ashtanga Yoga. Towards the 33rd verse, towards the 33rd verse, or let's just put that. Then Arjuna asked 2 questions. And then Krishna, in the last 2 words, he explains who's the topmost yogi. Let's see, where I have this here also. So yes, so how to practice Ashtanga, and then Paramatma realization through Ashtanga Yoga. So this is a subsection of which we just discussed, which was this Ashtanga Yoga section. And then Arjun's doubt starts coming from verse number 33. He says, first question he says is that, oh, Krishna, this system appears to be too impractical. That controlling the wind is much easier than controlling your mind, he says that. And then another question that comes to Arjun is that he's thinking in his heart that, oh my God, this seems so impractical and I will never be able to do it. So let me confirm what will happen to me in case I fail, right? So he asks this question of what happens to people who fail. And then Krishna answers that question up to verse number 45. And the last 2 verses, Krishna talks about, again, brings the whole focus back to Bhakti Yoga. And in the last 2 verses. Atma-upena sarvatra. Yeah, the verses where Krishna will establish this part. So the connection between chapter 5 and 6, we briefly talked about it. Of text 55.27-28, it talked about Astanga Yoga. So Krishna set a scene for Astanga Yoga. And then Krishna, by discussing Astanga Yoga and through Arjun's doubts, the 2 questions that he asked, Krishna will establish that Astanga Yoga is an impractical path. It's not easy to follow it. So we should reject it and go back to Bhakti, which already encompasses all these lower paths: karma, karma kanda, nishkam karma, sakam karma, dhyana, jnana, dhyana. It includes everything automatically. Okay. And the requirements for Ashtanga Yoga are extensive, and we'll discuss more of those in detail as we go forward. So that's the connection. That's the overview of what we discussed in the 5th and what we'll be discussing in the 6th chapter. Okay, so coming back to this slide we had. Okay, coming back to this. Okay, so this slide. So there are eight levels that we discussed for yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Okay. So in the last verse that we discussed, the peace formula, Suhridam Sarva Bhutana, said that. that I'm the well-wisher, right? Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shantim rachati. So he was giving a glimpse of the Paramatma feature, right? So the question comes, okay, then you just gave me a glimpse of the Paramatma feature, but then how can one perceive Paramatma? And how can one attain Paramatma realization? Therefore, discussion moving on to Ashtanga Yoga, right? So the discussion of this chapter is focused around, so Krishna has already talked about Huma Karma Yogis. We just did that in 5th chapter, right? Equanimity and all that stuff. So the question is now that, so the discussion in this chapter is going to be what a Karma Yogi who goes to the stage of Dhyana, what should that person practice? Okay. So before we go into the details of this chapter, let's look at this description of the yogas, right? Okay. And let me see, do I have it? Okay. Yes. So this was the verse I had referred last year also about where do these all come from. So this is 3rd chapter, 3rd canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Kapila Muni talks about Ashtanga Yoga also there. So Kapila Muni gives an overview about all the forms of yoga. So there are 2 aspects to it. So the first aspect is yama, and the second aspect is niyama. Okay, so this, if you want to keep record, is 3rd canto, 28th chapter, 4th verse. So let's look at the sections. So these are the sections which I've mentioned there. So starting from the first one is yama. Okay, so yamas are the don'ts. So you should not be violent, right? So ahimsa. Then was the second one is satyam. You have to be truthful. Okay. And then asteyam. Asteyam means don't steal. Let's see the meanings in the next verse. Ahimsa is non-violence. Satyam is truthfulness. Asteyam is refraining from theft. And parigraha is possessing. Yavat artha parigraha. That is possessing more than what is necessary. Okay. So, and then brahmacharyam is celibacy. Okay. So don't steal. Asteya means don't steal. And when it talks about not stealing, it's just not on a physical plane that, okay, we don't steal anybody's money, we don't steal anybody's property, but we also don't steal anybody's credit. That's more on a mental plane. We should always give credit where credit is due. We don't lose credit by giving credit where it is due to others, right? So when we are not looking for credit, we get a lot of work done, right? So one thing that Prabhupada mentioned is this: Prabhupada was about to leave his body, he called Giriraj Swami Maharaj and he asked Giriraj Swami Maharaj that, how are you going to run this society? Prabhupada asked his disciple. Prabhupada was about to leave, I think a day or 2 before he was leaving. And His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj said that Prabhupada will chant, we'll walk the path as you have shown us. Prabhupada said, that's okay, but you should do it through cooperation and organization. That is important. So cooperation and organization. So cooperation is one of the most, I would say, most austere thing. Cooperation, we can't cooperate, at least, I always have, my ego is so bloated that I always have a struggle cooperating with others. Right? So Prabhupada, that is why Prabhupada, even when he was leaving, was establishing that cooperation is what is going to keep the movement going. So it's a very important aspect that we, in a fit of taking credit, we let go of the cooperative attitude. We let go of the organizational aspect of this movement that Prabhupada had started. Okay. So then comes last is brahmacharya. So no contemplation on sex life. And Prabhupada tells us that for grastas, for brahmacharis and sannyasis, it's a strict no, that you cannot even contemplate on sex life. For grastas, as Prabhupada says, that For grasthas, and we have talked about it before, right? Grastha is the toughest ashram out of all the four. Because in brahmacharya, sannyas, ashramas, there you can just say a strict no. Okay, we're not going to do this. But in grastha ashram, we are expected to engage, but in a controlled way. So complete abstinence is easier than a controlled engagement. So brahmacharya for a grastha, celibacy for a grastha means that we use it to procreate, to bring forth Krishna conscious children. Right? Krishna will say this in the 7th chapter, Dharma viruddha bhuteshu kamosmi bhartarshava. That sex life which is in sync with dharma is right, and that's me actually. It's coming from me. So brahmacharya just doesn't mean that it's complete celibacy. For grasthas, it's even harder. For grasthas means you engage, but in a controlled fashion and only for a higher purpose. So that's what brahmacharya means. Okay? And so these don'ts are important for us, because to progress in bhakti, if we don't do these do's and don'ts, we are externally performing devotional service, while internally we are still holding on to things. We're not truthful. We have this tendency to steal, and it's stealing. Stealing at a material level is easy. We don't steal money or anything, but at a mental level, it's a bit harder. As I said, credit, not stealing credit. So if we Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives the analogy of an anchor in a boat, that you have to pull the anchor out in order to make advancement in devotional service. We make voluntary life changes, VLCs. Right? If we continue to externally perform devotional service while internally I keep on holding to material things, then it's not appropriate. It is a story that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur tells, that once there was this wedding party that was coming, and they had to cross the river, and it was dark, and they reached to the boat, and they asked the boatman to take them across the river. And the boatman said, okay, yes, you all fine, be seated. They all sat down in the boat. It was night, they all fell asleep. And then this boatman started rowing the boat. And he rows the boat, and when morning happens, all the wedding party members see that they're still where they started at night. They haven't moved even an inch. And what had been done was that the boatman didn't pull the anchor out. So the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur talks of this story. So understanding that anchor has to be pulled out as we pursue devotional service. Then niyamas. So niyama, as the word you all know, is regulation. Niyama means regulation. And the niyamas are Tapa, Shaucham, Swadhyaya, Purusharchanam. So Tapa is austerity, Shaucham is cleanliness, Swadhyaya is study of the Vedas, Purusha Archanam, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so that is the Niyama part. There's a monam that comes in the next verse. So if you're looking for it, so that will be in 328.5. I've not included that verse here. But monam is also one of the niyamas that's generally brought up. And it's so starting with tapa, right? Austerity. Okay. So we all have to do austerities. It's only through austerity that we make progress. And it's denying the senses their interest in pursuit of a higher goal. Right? Temporary inconvenience for permanent convenience. And so when we do austerities, it convinces Krishna sitting in our heart that Prem Dham is really serious about pursuing what he is doing. And then Krishna from within my heart gives me knowledge, one, and then he also destroys ignorance from my heart. So he does a two-pronged job, sitting in my heart. Right? So there are two things, right? He Jnana Deepena Bhasvata. Through the knowledge, he Deepena, light of the knowledge, Bhasvata, he burns the ignorance. So Krishna says that. Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
Prabhuji, aparigraha is over possessing?
Aparigraha, yes. So let's look at that in the right. So let's go there. Yavat artha parigraha. Right? So yavat artha means as much as necessary, possessing. So aparigraha there that is being mentioned is over endeavoring. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
It came in the nectar of instruction also. We read this, right? It came the second verse. Right?
Tendency of over enduring, yeah.
Yeah, atyahara priyasascha prajalponiyamagra. So atyahara. There was also collecting more than is needed, eating more than is. Yes, so it's similar to that. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So yes, we talked about temporary inconvenience for permanent convenience, the austerities. So they were saying austerity, when we do austerity, the whole purpose of austerity is purification. And that purification, in one sense, if you look at it from a broader perspective, Krishna, everybody says that, oh, I want to see God, I want to see Krishna, why can't I see him? Or it's not Krishna's responsibility all the time to prove himself to us. It's my responsibility also to prove my sincerity to him. That also is also there. Other people all keep asking that, I want to see Krishna, why can't I see him? I don't see him. All that sort of, it's okay to think that way, but you also have to look at it from the other perspective that Krishna is not alone who's the one who has to prove himself to us. We also have to be equally competent in proving ourselves to him. Right? That is why when we do austerities, this is one of the ways by which we convince Krishna, I'm serious about what I'm doing. This path is very serious for me. And I know that I have not been sincere over many lifetimes, but this time I'm really making a sincere effort. So please acknowledge this. Please accept me. So that is why austerities are the most important. We talked about it last time also, and it's here also, right? Tapaha swadhyay ishvara pranidhan kriya yoga. I put this statement here. Austerities, swadhyay, knowledge, and then ishvara pranidhan, focusing on ishvara. That is the concept of kriya yoga as dhyana yoga, Astanga yoga. These are different names for the same. So tapa is very important for all of us. And then shaucha, internal and external cleanliness. Swadhyaya is deep and self-study of scriptures. But self-study doesn't mean that you cannot discuss it with others. You can always, dadati pratigarnati, guhyam prachati can always happen. You should discuss it openly with others also, confidentially with others. So that is there. So, but scriptures have to be studied there. Then comes Ishvara Pranidhan, so Purusharchanam, Ishvara Pranidhan is the same thing. So how do you say it? We should have a form on which we could meditate upon. Right? Dhyana vastita tadgatena manasa pashyantiyam yoginam. The 12th canto, there's a verse that says that for dhyana yogis, the goal is to realize that the yogino is that sitting in the heart, mana, Krishna sitting in our heart to realize that form. Okay? And we as bhakti yogis, we also should have a form of Krishna to meditate upon. It's important. There are many verses in Bhagavata. One of my favorite verses. This comes in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, the first verse of that. And I don't know if anybody has gone to Vrindavan. If you have gone to Vrindavan, if you go to the Krishna Balram Mandir, this is a beautiful painting. It's a big painting, I think 20-25 feet tall, on one of the walls in the back of one of the back buildings of the Krishna Mandir in Vrindavan. And it talks of beauty of Krishna, right? Naumidyate abhravapushas tadidambaraya gunjavatam shaparipicchala sanmukhaya vanyashraje kavala vetra vishan venu lakshmashriye mridu pade pashupangajaya. So what this verse is, this is 14th chapter, Brahma, Lord Brahma speaking, and he's worshipping Krishna. He's talking about so many qualities in Krishna. He says, Abhravapusha, that you have your body is bluish, like a fresh cloud, dark, like a new cloud. Your clothes are like lightning, Tadid Ambaraya. Then you are wearing gunja, earrings, gunja vatamsha. And paripicha is peacock feather. So you're wearing a peacock feather. Your mukhaya is effulgent. Your face is effulgent. And then he says you have a venu, you have a pawn. And so when you read this verse, and you can think of Krishna. You can meditate on Krishna. That this is the beauty of Krishna. Right? You can think of him as this beautiful, blue boy wearing this effulgent, with the face, glowing face, and his ears having these earrings, beautiful earrings, and he's holding a horn, buffalo horn. He has some morsel of food in his hand. So you can meditate on that. So Ishvara Pranidhan, which is even Ashtanga Yoga, and talked about it. Ashtanga Yoga also talks of Ishvara, but then today people have just excluded that entire aspect and just focusing on asanas, which is very frustrating because that's very misleading to people. It's practically a crime to tell people only about asanas and not about the other aspects of Ashtanga Yoga. So this is one beautiful verse to meditate on Krishna. And there are many others also. This one another one which talks about Krishna's relationship with his devotees. That's 10th canto, 90 chapter, 90, verse 48. Jayati Jannivaso Devaki Janmavado Yaduvara Parishad Swer Dobhi Rasena Dharma. So there he talks about his relationship with others. Jayati Jannivaso. He's the Jannivasa. He's the well-wisher of all. Devaki Janmavado. He's the son of Devaki. There are many other relationships to talk about Yadus, Yadavas, and Gopis. So in this way, we can focus on Krishna. And some very, so, and there are many. You might have your own verses. You might already know some verses that are there, but there are many of them. So then there was niyamas. Okay, so niyama, as I was saying, it's an expression of our sincerity. Right? When we are focused, when we do the best with what we have, and Krishna sees our intention, he sees our determination, our steadiness, and according to our capacity. That's the important aspect. Don't try to overdo, don't try to outdo your capacity. Because Krishna knows that we all are imperfect. So Krishna is not looking for perfection. All he's looking for is that my intention is there. Right? Bhava grahi janardhan. Bhava, he's looking for bhava, he's looking for the intention in my heart. And obviously, it doesn't mean that you don't put in our efforts, but you should. But then we should not get disgusted with our inability to do what we are supposed to do. Okay? Because defeat and hopelessness is also an anartha. It is one of the ways Maya attacks us. So follow yama niyamas, but it's to our best of our capacity. That is why Krishna will then towards the end, he will say that forget about it. I know it's hard. You just go and do bhakti yoga as I've been teaching you. Okay. Asan, we know asan, right? Asanas are the different poses that we learn, which is the most famous aspect of yoga. Pranayam, pranayam is focusing on the pranas. There are 5 vayus in our body. 5 vayus. I think Prabhupada will discuss this in one of the purports later chapters. We'll discuss it more in detail there. But then in a broader sense, those 5 vayus, they define my agility, energy, the functionality of this body. So once we cleanse the prana, then we can become tremendously energetic. Then there is pratyahara, to shut off external energy. Dharana, then comes dharana, is concentration on an object. It's very short-term concentration. Right now, our attention span is very short. Right? I read somewhere that right now our attention span is 7 or 8 seconds. That is why Facebook, YouTube, started making these shorts. So I don't know about you all, but when I start seeing shorts or these reels, it's kind of it just puts me in a trance. Just go 1, 2, you just keep, so I just move 1 to next. So that's a dharana, but in a very wrong way. We should not do that. So concentration on an object without interpretation is called dharana. So dharana is the beginning aspect, and this span keeps increasing. Right? So there is concentration and there is attention. Right? So how long can you hold a subject in your contemplation is dharana shakti. Then how long can you pay attention is your ekagra shakti. So the relationship between. So the process of paying attention for any length of time or an activity or an object is referred to as concentration. So concentration can be high or low, but your attention is always, it's one, right? Either you have attentive to one thing or you're not. So that's the way to look at it. And yogis are able to increase it. Right? Then dhyana, when that span of meditation, of concentration increases, then it's called dhyana. And samadhi is full, complete attention and concentration on the supreme. Right? Samyak adhiyate asmin atma tattva yathatmaya. That when the mind is fixed for understanding the self, that is said to be samadhi. So as I've been saying, we as bhakti yogis surpass all these yoga steps because one, what we are doing in bhakti, and then secondly, the way Prabhupada has presented it to us in a very sort of a tablet or a capsule. It's just perfect. You just take it in. 4 regulated principles, chanting. I know we are already beyond all these Astanga, Dhyan, Gyan, everything. We've covered everything by those 4 regulative principles, and then the chanting process. So all that is covered. Prabhupada has given us a perfect system to reach samadhi automatically, right? So as I mentioned in Kali Yuga, all these practices are very hard. People are not even able to follow yama niyama, and unfortunately just jump to asan processes, and it's completely useless in one sense. So the whole purpose of this is, like if you see the progression, how it's happening is, if you look at the analogy of a lake, if a lake, there are a lot of ripples in the lake, you're not able to see the bottom. But if you're able to somehow, the lake kind of just, it's not turbulent anymore, settles down, then you're able to look at the bottom. That's the purpose of this Ashtanga Yoga. It's controlling the mind through these yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, all these processes. So the goal is to calm the mind. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Right? Chitta vritti is constant agitation in my consciousness. That's what it means. So those vrittis are like these impressions. They're constantly agitating me 24/7. So chitta vritti yoga nirodha. So when we are able to control those, that's the goal of yoga. So we need to see the bottom of the lake, then it has to be calm. So my mind has to be calm. Okay.
Question?
Yes, bro, please.
You just blew me away. Okay, what time is it?
7:40
minutes. Yeah, this 30 minutes here was really intense. I mean, there's so much information. The structural breakdown and the progressive steps here. I mean, it's just, if it weren't for Prabhupada summarizing it as Krishna consciousness, I mean, I can catch up. I can only ride with you, but I can't assimilate it and digest it. I mean, there's a lot here. I can see that this is not just a walk in the park, that this is what we're getting in Krishna consciousness is so technically advanced without having to have to go through all this swimming. I mean, it's really intense for me. I'm trying to figure out, well, what am I responsible for here now? Besides you shedding familiarity with the intensity of and the value of really what Prabhupada has given us. This sheds light on that for me, anyhow.
Yeah. No, Prabhu, I totally agree with you. What Prabhupada has given us, it's so perfect, and I just can't. Every day my appreciation, increases, because I realize that for me to go into all the scriptures trying to find a solution for it, how to follow those, it's mind-boggling and practically impossible in one life. But here Prabhupada has given it in such a condensed way. He's given us, like for example, yama niyamas. Prabhupada has given us those regulative principles. He's just given us the cream of it. You don't have to worry about the others. If you follow the 4 regulative principles, you're automatically beyond all the Ashtanga yogis. Right? Then he's given us chanting process. He's given us how to do dhyana. We just read a verse from Bhagavatam. But how do you get to the dhyana? You focus on Krishna. You just think about Krishna, the beautiful blue boy. He's playing in the park with his friends, and he's coming after taking his cows out for a walk, and there's that dust from the hooves of the cows that's just up in the air and that comes and settles down in here. I mean, it's just amazing what Prabhupada has given us. Nobody has ever done that, and I don't think anybody will be able to do that again, what Prabhupada has given and done that for us. So I totally agree with you, Prabhu.
So what happens? I mean, with this part of the Bhagavad Gita, what happens to everybody? I mean, were they of mental capacity to digest this in previous times? And then when Prabhupada comes into the scene with us, he creates it to a degree that
Prabhu, your voice is kind of going in and out. I'm not sure if you're moving. If you be closer to the laptop, it'll be better.
Yeah, I was just saying, Prabhupada has made it really very so much simpler after listening to what you have to show and explain here. I mean, I was never aware of all the intense things that I've been doing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what the only thing I can say is I can appreciate how deep this is. It's just like in the nectar of devotion. It starts out mellow and then it gets deep.
Yeah.
And similarly, this is a similar situation, but the thing is that even though this is deep in reference to what you're saying, it's simplified by what Prabhupada has given us.
Yes.
So in some ways, I'm not going to try to figure all this out and memorize all this as much as I try to do what Prabhupada wants us to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not missing.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss the boat. Yeah,
Yeah. We don't have to memorize any of this. I give some facts and details because I feel that yes, I will be satisfied, but you might when we go out, right? Because eventually we have to share what we have got. We have to become like a vessel, a conduit, right? That I have got something, I need to pass it forward. Otherwise, it will just rot within me. When we give it to others, people can ask all sorts of questions, and we should be ready for all that. And when we started Bhakti Sastri, there are three things, right? Enrich, enlighten, and empower. Empower. So when we share it with others, we should be in a position that we can answer others' questions. That's why I give some facts. Obviously, my goal is not that we should memorize this, but just having a basic understanding really strengthens our manas, sudrida. It makes it more stronger. Our intelligence gets stronger, and we are more confident to present it to others. We don't have to memorize all this.
Well, I try to take notes, but you went past me with taking notes on this. At least I have the charts, because I can go back now. What you pointed out makes me want to look at it closer,
Yeah. That's why I was giving the other details, right? Like Krishna is only looking for our sincerity. He's looking for my determination. And when I have that sincerity, when I'm focused in my spiritual life to the best of my capacity, no showing off business here, we can also give it to others then. Because Krishna sees that purpose in our heart, the intensity of my purpose, the sincerity and the practice that I'm doing. And then Krishna makes all arrangements to fulfill our desires. His name is Vanchatita. In one of the books Sanatana Goswami wrote, he says he's Vanchatita. He fulfills our desires beyond our imagination. But before that, I have to show my intensity and my sincere desire. That Krishna, this time I'm really serious. So then when I come to that point, my niyama, yama, all that is taken care of automatically, right? Asanas, when we sit down to meditate, we do our chanting, we are already doing that asana, right? We already there. So we don't have to worry about all this. All Krishna is looking for our sincerity and intensity. But it also, when we go through all this, we also appreciate how Bhakti Yoga is the supreme. Right? If I just keep telling everybody Bhakti Yoga is the topmost Bhakti Yoga, but I don't give them a background, what the other yoga types are, the other person might not be able to fully appreciate the fact that Bhakti Yoga is the topmost. But when I say that, okay, Arjun himself is saying that Astanga Yoga is not possible, then why am I trying to follow it? I should not. So, with all those thoughts, it just strengthens our determination to follow what Krishna and Prabhupada have given us. Yes, Prabhu, we don't have to memorize, but yes, I appreciate your point that what Prabhupada has given us is such valuable, it's extremely valuable. Okay. Before we start, any more thoughts, anybody else? I'm going to jump into the verses now. Just given this brief, not brief, but a good amount of background, now I'll jump into the verses. No one? Okay, let's get into the verses then. The first verse, Krishna is speaking. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So Krishna is talking about sannyas again here. Sannyas brought out here. We talked about in the 5th chapter also beginning. So Krishna again is highlighting and stressing upon the fact that sannyasi is truly a sannyasi is one who's unattached to the fruits of his work. Right? Don't give up the work, give up the fruits to the work. So practically people who are in Krishna consciousness are already sannyasi because they are giving up the fruits of their work. They are doing everything for Krishna. Nothing for me, everything for Krishna. So that way, so it's not that for to be a sannyasi we have to wear that orange robe. Well, it's a mark in the society, right? We have a varna and ashramas. So people who are sannyasa varna, sannyasa ashram, they wear those dresses. But in general, if you look at it from a broader perspective, we are also at least putting in our efforts to become sannyasis because we are trying to be unattached to the fruits of this. And that's what Krishna is saying. So he brings up this concept of lights no fire, performs no duty. So fire lighting, the reason Krishna is bringing this concept of fire lighting, because in the past, a sannyasi is, like yogis, right? They used to perform yajnas, right? They would do fire sacrifices. So that is why Krishna is bringing this concept of a fire sacrifice here, that don't just give up your duty. So just Krishna is amongst dhyana yogis who are meditating, prominent is lighting the sacrificial fire. The prescribed duty for dhyana yogis in the past ages was to do yajna, fire sacrifices. That is why Krishna is bringing out this, that don't give up that duty. You have a duty, you have a prescribed duty, don't give that up. Right? So, so he's saying that anashrita karma phalam. That's the phrase Krishna is using. Anashrita karma phalam. Don't be ashrita on the karma phalam. Okay. So ashraya means dependence. Karma phala means results of the karma. So people in general take ashraya of the fruit, right? The karma outcome. But then broadly, Bhagavad Gita is not against achievements. Okay. But Krishna never says that, oh, don't do anything, because if somebody can ask, right, we are obviously doing everything for a result in mind. But what Krishna is teaching us here is don't be dependent on that result for everything. It's not that the result will define my happiness or sorrow. That's what Krishna is trying to highlight here. Bhagavad Gita is not against achievements. Bhagavad Gita never says that you should not try to be the best in your whatever field you are in, or not try to win awards. But what Krishna is saying, don't be dependent on them. Right? Don't just make those outer goals, the achievements, the only goal. Then it will not be fruitful. Then it will end up either in being morose or being happy. The only two outcomes are there. And in the majority of the times, it is mostly moroseness, because never has it ever happened in this world that my plans fructify to the utmost 100% value. Never happened. There'll always be a kink here. Okay, no, I didn't get this part or that part, or I had to compensate here, and so forth. So Krishna, right in the beginning, is telling, don't be dependent on the fruits of the result. Right? So sannyasi is bringing this Krishna. Right? So living, as I said, living entities, as in Krishna consciousness, because we are perfect sannyasis, right? When I say living entity, means as a soul, the soul is already a sannyas, perfect sannyasi, because we don't have any selfish desires. But then under the illusion, I start thinking of desires and I start expecting things, right? So Let's see what Prabhupada is saying in the pulpit. Okay, yes, Prabhupada is giving the reason here. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties and therefore they cease to perform Agnihotra Yagyas. But actually they are self-interested because their goal is to become one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. So a person who gives up their duties, right, and thinks that I'm above them, he's actually, there is still self-interest in that person. Right? That is why in Kali Yuga, sannyas is not to be given. But the sannyas that is not to be given is karma sannyas. That nobody should be given an order of a sannyasi to give up the duties. Right? A sannyasi can be one who uses everything for Krishna's service. Right? If you see the sannyasis in our movement, in Prabhupada's movement, sannyasis are doing that, they are taking care of disciples and they're doing many of these tasks. But they're not given those up. They see that as their duty. They don't see it as a fulfillment of self-satisfaction. They do it as a duty. So karma sannyas is banned in Kali Yuga, and Prabhupada never gave that to any of his disciples. All his disciples continue to engage in Krishna consciousness and do all their services. So there is no self-interest in there. Prabhupada quotes Shikshashtakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's 8 verses. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagati shakamaye, mama janmani janma ishware, bhavatad bhaktir ahitukitva. That I have no desires for anything. All I want is your causeless mercy, birth after birth. Right? No followers needed, nothing. I don't want anything, Krishna. I only want your causeless mercy, life after life. And Bhakti Vinod Thakur is my favorite poet. He says that, right? That Kita janma hoye, ichha yadi tora, bhakta grihe, jani janma hoye mora. That if you think that in my next life I should be an insect or somebody, just let me be born in a devotee's house. That's all Bhakti Vinod Thakur says. He's a pure devotee. He's never going to be born as a, but that's his humility. So that's what devotees think. That's the way they look at it.
Question?
Yes, please. I can't hear you, Prabhu.
Oh,
You're on mute, Prabhu. I can hear you. Yeah, you're on mute, Prabhu. Unmute yourself.
I said you were saying that I'm somewhat confused because there's no self-interest, and the thing that clarified it when you said Lord Chaitanya Nadanam Najanam, and so, but there is always a wanting of something. I mean, I'm trying to understand how one can separate himself from one can separate the self from his desire, for the personal self. Because even in my personal self, I do desire something, and my self-interest is the interest of Krishna, though. So even though I have a self-interest, I do have a self-interest, and that is my interest is for him. Is that okay? I mean, something.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, bro.
I'm just trying to pinpoint the position of myself in reference to this, because I do feel something. I want something out of this. I have a wanting of something, and so basically I'm trying to see, well, the correct position for the wanting of the self is to align himself with Krishna as Krishna wants. But still, there's a way, but in a way, even though you don't have self-interest, there is some self-interest, isn't it?
But it's no more self-interest, Prabhu, because a devotee has purified his or her desires completely and has completely aligned them to Krishna. So, for example, right, that I'm not sure if it's the right example, but let's say I'm conduit, right? I'm a pipe through which water is flowing, and I've been joined with other pipes. If I am off that, so then I'm also taking up other things. Probably air is coming in, dirt is coming in, water is also coming in. But when I'm fully aligned, that's my true purpose. Then there is no more interest of mine anywhere. It's completely my true nature, and my true nature is to be Krishna's servant. And when I'm doing that, then there is not considered to be self-interest anymore, because I've fully aligned myself with Krishna's desire. So that's the way I see it, Prabhu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whatever desires even we have, we use those to work for Krishna, to fulfill Krishna's desire. We dovetail them in Krishna's service, right? For example, right, there is a circle of my interest. There is something that interests me, and there is bhakti, right? And there are some points of intersection. But eventually, when both those circles overlap, then even though it looks like there is some of my interest, but then it's completely in bhakti, right? The circles, when they'll keep on overlapping. When I increase my bhakti, the circles will keep overlapping, and one day they'll be one over the other completely. Right? So then it's no more my interest anymore. It's completely aligned with bhakti, and all my anarthas, even they are also dovetailed in that service, in that desire. Right? All my whatever anarthas I have, even when I align those towards Krishna, they are no more anarthas then, right? So it's the same thing, but just because it's been aligned with Krishna and his desire, they no more have the potency to affect me anymore. That's another way of looking at it. Did that make sense, bro? You're on mute if you're speaking.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it's just like you read that Nadanam Najanam. There's something that I don't desire, but there is something that I do desire. And then the real self-interest is not the selfish one.
Yeah.
It's really not it's almost not called self-interest, because it's become selfless in the point that one is not trying to do something for their own personal sense gratification.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really beautiful. I mean, yeah, I understand what's happening there, but I was thinking, well, what's the point then? Why am I going out here trying to succeed to feed people on the food truck? Why am I attached to the results? But then again, you said, no, you're allowed to do that, but the point is, what's happening to me on the way? Like every day, my meditation is, oh, I get to go out and give them the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I have the meditation in this activity and on this path, that it becomes all encompassing as opposed to just the result.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, that's true, Prabhu. And as Krishna says, anashrita karma phalam. What you are doing is fully in Krishna consciousness, right? You're going out in a fruit run. You're following to the dot your Prabhupada's order, Krishna's order. So what happens after that is not going to affect you in any way. So that's what anashrita. You're not dependent on the outcome, right? You're just doing whatever Krishna is telling you to. And you had a desire, let's say, let's presume you had an interest for cooking, and so you now dovetailed it completely in Krishna's service. So even though it was your interest, but now having been overlaid with the circle of bhakti, your circle of interest, it's no more your self-interest anymore. Now it has become Krishna's interest. So you're still doing the same thing, but it's no more your interest. So it's not to be considered as self-interest anymore. Now it's Krishna's interest, even though the activity is the same. Externally it might look like the same, right? So all we need to do is we just have to make our loving contribution, right? To based on whatever distinctive constellation of talents and interests we have. We just love Krishna. We serve in the mood of devotional service. We just try to be best in that with whatever capacity we have, and all that, everything else becomes automatically aligned. after that, right? So your self-interest overlay with Krishna's interest, and there's no karma for this. So you are completely cleaning up your slate. A time will come, then we're ready to go back home, back to Godhead.
Yeah, I see that. I see one thing too here, what you just said now. I realize that we are conditioned with everything we do with a certain mentality. And now the same conditioning is changed. So we recondition ourselves to still do our activities. Just like Arjuna didn't have to run off and do this. What did he get? A change of heart.
Yeah.
So this just change of heart, really evaluating our position, because we're not going to be able to stop doing things. So there's got to be that reconditioning, that change of consciousness, so that we don't get bound to that result. But it appears to be doing the same thing as Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
You know, even the people that I see in the street trying to give out food to people, but they're doing it for the general welfare of mankind instead of for the ultimate salvation of their soul by giving them prashadam, a matter of consciousness.
Yeah. So and that's what we were discussing. I think was it the last time. So no, not in this class. There was another class that was taking. Difference between goodness and transcendence. The activity looks same, right? You mentioned the other people also giving food, but then they don't connect it to transcendence, to Krishna. So they are doing it in a mode of goodness, which is good, which is much better than the 99% of the population out there. But then still they're not in transcendence. Whereas you doing the exact same thing, you are in transcendence now. You're even beyond the three modes of nature. And that's what the difference brings in when we do it as a loving service to Krishna. That's the whole difference where it makes it. You suddenly come out of those three modes of nature. So activity looks same, but it's no more self-interest.
It's very important. I mean, our whole existence centers around this.
Yeah.
It's very nice. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, Shalini Mati, you had your hand up.
Yes, Prabhuji. I was just trying to relate this verse with the verse 3.4. And there also they talk about the qualification to take sannyasa, right? In the verse 3.4. So there was something.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep speaking.
So Prabhuji, in that was something that did not add up for me. So it says if we can go to that verse, so it says that the person who does not perform the prescribed duties but is engaged in the transcendental service to Krishna is accepted by him. So that particular, no, we have to go down. If on the other, if someone takes to the transcendental service of the Lord, even without discharging the prescribed duty, he can be accepted by Krishna. So means that that does not. Could you please elaborate?
Yes. So this is a very good point you bring, Armaji. This particular statement is not for us. When I say us, means people who are sadhaka bhaktas, who are on the path of devotional service. This statement is for somebody who's the topmost, Uttam Adhikari. Okay? And I'll quote you a verse, 11th canto, and I might have talked about it earlier. 11th canto, chapter 20, verse 9. Let me pull that verse out, and if I can share it. So, share this. Yes, so this is the verse 11:29, 11th canto, chapter 20, verse 9. So it says, as long as one is not satiated by fruitive activity and has not awakened his taste for devotional service, by Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, one has to act according to regulated principles of the Vedic injunctions. Right? And the purport begins, unless one has developed firm faith in Lord Krishna and is thus engaged full time in devotional service of the Lord, one should not neglect ordinary principles and duties. right?
Correct.
So this is the major difference here. What is it? Engaged full-time, firm faith. My faith is very shaky. My full-time, forget about full-time. If I am able to even devote an hour every day, that's a big thing. So I am way, way away from that position that Prabhupada is talking about in the verse that you were quoting right now.
Mhm.
That's the difference. So that particular statement Prabhupada is making is only for Uttam Adhikari, the top level devotees who have realized that Krishna is sitting in everybody's heart, who have factually realized Krishna for themselves. They have seen him face to face. For them, they can give up those duties also. But so that's a difference, Madhuri. Hope that was clear enough.
Prabhuji, very clear. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's come back to our verse. So yes, we did the first verse, so let's coming to the second one. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. So now Krishna is putting renunciation and yoga at the same level. And yoga, he's defining it as linking oneself with the Supreme. So as we discussed in the last verse, anashrita karma phalam, when we are not dependent on the results, right? So that's the situation of a sannyasi. Let's say the sannyasi is not worried about what the outcome is going to be, right? So then it's equal to yoga, right? So let me try to explain it. Krishna is saying that the link between renunciation and linking oneself to the Supreme, which he's calling yoga, is giving up the desire for sense gratification. So that's the connecting point for both of those classes of people, right? So desire for freedom from material desires, is the connecting point for a karma phala tyaga, and for a person who's controlled his senses, like renunciation, and who's linked himself to the Supreme. So that's what Krishna is mentioning here, right? So the Prabhupada will say in the purport, I think it says that the real aim, yes, the real aim for a living entity is for a living entity to give up all all selfish satisfaction, and to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. So when that is the desire, then a sannyasi and a karma yogi are on the same platform. That's the way to look at this verse, right? So this is a focus on the path, that sannyasa and yoga, they both have a common denominator, which is sannyasta sankalpa. Yeah, sannyasta sankalpa, which means without giving up the desire for self-satisfaction. So when there is no desire for self-satisfaction, then that person is a sannyasi as well as a yoga karma yogi. They both are at the same level. That's what Krishna is explaining in this verse for us. So the focus is on the path here between sannyasis and yogis. Whereas in the last verse we read 6.1, the focus was on the person. So anashrita karma phalam. So a yogi is a sannyasi and a yogi. If they become anashrita karma phalam, then they both are at the same level. And the path they both are following, if they have no desire during that path, they have no desire for sense gratification, for self-satisfaction, selfish satisfaction, then the path is also same for both of them. Okay, third one. Now this is an important verse. Here kind of Krishna is beginning to get into Ashtanga Yoga. He uses two words, Aru Rukshor and Yoga Rudhasya. Let's see what those means. Aru Rukshor means one who has just begun yoga. And Arudhasya means one who has attained, so one who has completed the path. So one who is the beginner on the ladder versus one who is on the top of the ladder. Beginner Aruruksho, topmost, Arudhasya. If we go back to our slides, so I've divided these two sections. You can see on the top here. If you can see my cursor, but on the top is Aruruksho. The first four are Aruruksho, and the next two are Arudhasya. So that's where the division is coming on the ladder. So beginners, mostly Yama, Niyama, Pranayam, Asana. It's more on the physical level still. But then Arudhasya is more on a mental level, spiritual level, consciousness, Dhyan, Dharana, Pratyahara, and all that. So those are the two statements Krishna is talking about in this. So let's read the verse. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. So the Aruruksho, neophyte, work is said to be the means. Work means there is physical activity still involved, right? We talked about pranayam, asana, yama, niyamas. And for one who is elevated, who's beyond them, then those material activities can be cessation, right? You're trying to avoid them, that okay, I'm more about internal. I'm more about focusing on there is dhyana, dharana, pratyahara, shutting down the external senses, and then samadhi. So that's the difference between Aruruksho and Arudhasya. Those are the two things that are being talked about here, right? So when one who begins to climb, right, the activities that person is doing, they are used in spiritual advancement. So I'm talking about no theft, ahimsa, all that sort of things. They're still in the beginning, right? So there's still some activity involved there, right? But in the Arudha, there is calmness. There is a stage of renunciation, which comes up later in that part. So there is a stage, stage of renunciation. So that's kind of another way of looking at this yoga hierarchy. So yoga ruruksho, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, working in the external world with a desire to calm the mind, right? Working in the external world. Then comes yoga rudha, dhyana, dharana, pratyahara, and samadhi. So not doing the duties in the varnashrama system, right? So, but then Krishna himself has told us that don't give up the duties, just give up the attachment to the fruits of those duties, right? So that's Krishna is establishing here. Prabhupada makes a good statement here. Beginning, there was another idea. Okay. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. When one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. So initial part, controlling the senses. Later part, when accomplished, then there is a cessation of all mental activities. But then Prabhupada, as ever, he just brings up Krishna conscious and tells us how Krishna conscious person is already in that level of, yoga rudasya. He's already on the topmost rung. Because right from the beginning, we have focused for all our meditation on Krishna. And we are always engaged in Krishna. Everything we're doing is for Krishna's service. We use our money for Krishna's service. We use our intelligence to engage ourselves in different activities. There are so many activities we are doing at the temple. So all those activities, either it's preaching, trying to engage others in bhakti process, trying to make it very easy for them, giving them literature, or engaging them in service in the temple. Everything we're 24/7 thinking from that plan. So we are already in a stage of meditation. Let's see the fourth verse. Okay. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. So as we were discussing that, what situates one on a yoga rudha stage? How will we know? How will we know who's on a yoga rudha stage? So the verse I quoted from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, That's for a yoga rudha. That a yoga rudha can give up those activities. A yoga ruruksha, as me, cannot give up those activities. So Krishna is also giving that same concept here. That so three characteristics of a yoga rudha are being mentioned here. Let's see what are the three characteristics. So Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. One. Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. That is no desiring. Sankalpa Sannyasi. Sankalpa means desire has been given. Then is Nendriyartheshu. Nendriyartheshu. There is Nendriyartheshu means not engaging. Right? So this is basically avoiding direct enjoyment. So I'm not at all engaging in sense gratification. There is no direct enjoyment. Nendriyartheshu. Okay. So that's one. And then third one is na karma karmashu anusajjate. Right? So na karma anusajjate means I'm not even pursuing any fruitive activities. Right? So I hope I was clear that there are three stages. Desiring, that is sarva sankalpa sannyasi. There's no desire even. Second level, engaging. Naindriyartheshu. There's no engagement. There's no actual engagement. There's no direct enjoyment involved. Third, pursuing. I'm not even pursuing that. Right? So there's a difference between desiring something and pursuing something. Right? So desiring comes first, and then pursuing comes that I start doing things to make that happen. So there's no even pursuance of it. There's no activities that will lead to sense enjoyment at all. So those are the three stages being mentioned here. So those are the three ways by which we know who is in a yoga rudhasya. Yoga rudhasya stage. Without Krishna consciousness, one must be always seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. Prabhupada makes a very bold statement here. Without bhakti, everybody else would be in some form or the other, there will be some self-centered desires. For a person who is in on a Brahman platform or on a, there's a desire for impersonalists, there's a desire to merge with Krishna. Okay? That's also, there's some desire that, okay, there's still some me there in that picture. But what a devotee, the way devotee thinks, as I was quoting Bhakti Vinod Thakur, that a devotee says, you can put me wherever you want, Krishna. I don't have any problem. Right? Whether you punish me or whether you are happy with me, no problem. This Swarga Apavarga Narkeshu Tulyartha Vidarshina. Lord Shiva gives a description of in the 6th canto, he gives a description of a person. This Swarga Apavarga Narkeshu Tulyartha Vidarshina. That for a pure devotee, Swarga, Apavarga, Nark, all of them are same. No problem, no desires. Whereas everybody else, however elevated they may be, there will be some tinge of desire. That's the way Maya works with us. That is why we have to be very cautious. Because Maya, even for sometimes, people who they say that, okay, they become very elevated, but then desire to merge with Krishna, that can always pull them down. Right? Sometimes some people, they become very elevated, but then Maya slaps them and says, it makes them believe that I am God. I am God, right? Myself. I am Vishnu. I am Krishna. So that desire again shows up. So all the other aspects, there is some desire or the other. But in bhakti, only a bhakta is somebody who says, Krishna, wherever you put me, whatever you give me, nothing, no problem. I am fine. So that's the beauty of this process of bhakti. Yes, Mati. You raised your hand, Shalini Mati? Or was it there before?
Sorry, Prabhuji. I thought I unmuted myself. Sorry, Prabhuji. So I just wanted to, Prabhuji, clarify myself. So is there a difference between fruitive activity and the material activity?
Well, see, the word fruitive activity, as the name suggests, there is a desire to enjoy the fruit. When you say material activity, it's in this material world, but there could be another way of looking at it, right? For example, we all are doing material activity. We work 40 hours a week, some even more. We pay mortgages, but then we are trying to bring that into bhakti, right? So there's a slight nuanced difference that I just want. So the word fruitive makes it completely that I'm doing it for my own pleasure. But when I say material activities, they can also be dovetailed in Krishna's service. So even though they be material, but they can be dovetailed for Krishna's service. So there's a fine difference there to understand it.
Got it, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but as Prabhupada has taught us, we have to be intelligent when we are reading these things. We should know what is being talked about specifically. So, yeah, but yeah, it can be used interchangeably also. I wouldn't claim that it's a perfect distinction.
Thank you, Bhopal Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, so 5th verse. Oh, this is a very beautiful one. One of my favorite ones. Udharet atmanatmanam atmanam avasadayet atmeva hi atmano bandhur atmeva ripuratmana. That this mind can be my friend and mind can be my enemy. And it's a big discussion. You know, you can talk on hours about this concept of how mind fools us, how it degrades us. There's so many ways the mind tells us, or me trying to encroach upon others' properties, thinking it's mine, me being fearful of where I am, or me wanting more and more. So these are some 3 concepts. They're on top of my head because I was recently reading about them. But the mind can fool us. So the mind can be our enemy as well as our friend. So that's a very important verse and a very important concept to understand. And this is the main obstacle coming to the yoga rudha stage. So what Krishna is telling us, don't engage the mind in a way that it degrades the soul. Is that? Praise Him. Not degrade himself. Another beautiful thing about Prabhupada's translations is, Prabhupada tells us that the word Atma is being used differently in this verse. So he'll say here, the word Atma denotes body, mind, and soul depending upon different circumstances. And if you'll see, Prabhupada, the word Atma is used in so many times. Atmanatmanam, Naatmanam, Atmaiva, Atmano, Atmaiva, Atmanaha. Prabhupada will give the exact meaning. For example, the first Atmana is the mind. The Atmanatmana, the Atmana is the conditioned soul. Again, the Atmanam is conditioned soul. Atma is, so the word Atma is either meaning conditioned soul or mind in this verse. So that's why this is another very important reason why we need Prabhupada's purports. I have read a few other versions. They don't have that clarity which Prabhupada provides us, which gives us. The way they translate this verse is that you have to control the self with the self. Kind of just a very simple, sensical interpretation. But Prabhupada, because he's coming from that spiritual strata and he's an Uttamadhikari, he can give us that clarity in this. That is why this verse comes out as a very important verse. Whereas if you just put it as control yourself with the self, with that, nobody would understand what it means. So this is something that Prabhupada has given us. So one Atma, word referring to the soul, and the other two. So, and Prabhupada is using the word conditioned soul because in a conditioned stage, the mind is very connected to the body. Right? So, if we are our physical condition defines us our mental conditions also, right? So, if we are very close physically to the sense objects, my mind will also be connected. So, this verse is about the connection of the mind to the soul, right? So, but then there's another connection of mind to the body, right? And this consciousness that we have, which is mind, ego, and intelligence, that's the way is a door to the outer world. And how we utilize or how we look through the door is something that I can define. For example, many people come to the temple, they won't see the devotional aspect there. They won't see the intensity of and the sincerity of devotees trying to push forth a mission, push forth Krishna's mission. They might come and see what a beautiful chandelier, costly marble, oh, how nicely people are dressed, and so on and so forth. So they're using their mind to degrade themselves. Whereas at the same time, a bhakti devotee, when he or she goes to the temple, he's looking at Prabhupada there. Oh my God, Prabhupada is here, paying obeisances, deities are here, looking how nicely the deities are dressed, which is again using the mind, but again for a higher purpose, for a spiritual purpose. So the door to the outer world is through the mind, and how I use that will define whether I'm making the mind my friend or I'm making him my enemy. Right? So that's the kind of a connection we have to understand. Right? So the soul, as a soul, me, I can be conscious of material things or spiritual things. Right? If I'm going to focus materially and I go through the door of my mind, then I'll be looking for material things. But if I make it spiritual, the same door will become an enlightened door, which will take me to the right path. So we need a very conscious and consistent cultivation of the mind to eventually come to that level, to make it a friend. If the mind becomes in control, he will surely become an enemy. But if I as a soul am in control, then the mind will become my friend. And there are many, many tricks to it. Obviously, this is not a class or a discussion of mind. So we can, but then, yeah, there are so many things that we can do. Affirmations, noting down our realizations, all that to eventually keep us motivated on the path of bhakti. And we can always, by practice, bring it back on path. I've given that example many times about the pilot. The pilot is not sitting idly. He knows that even a degree of movement in a wrong direction can eventually take the aeroplane somewhere else. So practice. And so being attentive of what's going on around us. So loss of attention can cause destruction. Okay? So those are some basic things. And Prabhupada in the purport, he quotes one verse which I liked, was from Amrita Bindu Upanishad. So I always appreciate that Prabhupada brings out texts from other scriptures to confirm the authenticity and the supremacy of Bhagavad Gita in providing the message and being the essence of all the Vedas and Upanishads, right? Sarvopanishado gavo dugdha gopalanandana. So there's verse from Gita Mahatmya, Sarvopanishado gavo, that it's an analogy where all the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita is the Sarva Upanishad. It's the best of the Upanishads. It's the cow. Sarva Upanishado gavo dugdha gopalanandana. Gopalanandana, Krishna is dugdha. He's the cowherd boy, right? And he's milking the cow of the Upanishads. And Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta. So Partho, so Krishna, Arjun is the calf who's drinking that milk. And Sudhir Bhokta, all the other self-realized souls, they are also drinking the Dugdham Gitamritam Mahat, that this nectar coming from Gita, of Gita. So it's Sarvopanishadogā. And Prabhupada is factually giving us that by bringing in examples from all the other verses here, all the other scriptures here. Sarvopanishadogā, Dugdha Gopal. Okay, I'll take a pause here. We are at 8:30. So I won't go any further. Any last minute thoughts? Anything on anybody's mind? No? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll get back next week. We'll continue. Please keep on working on the